So it's part 2 of lesson 3. Just before we go back to finishing our calculator file, she meant to point this out at the beginning of class. There is an article I posted. It's the first item in the lesson 3 folder called Why the Hell Would I Use Node.js? So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this is well worth a read in terms of background. One of the conversations I've had with a few people in the class is, when is it appropriate to use Node and when is it not? And this article, I think, gives a really good description of not only what Node is and how it runs. Got a few visuals here. So, you know, this would be a traditional web application, how it handles requests versus the way Node does it. Talks about NPM, which obviously we're getting into. And he also describes some different application scenarios of which types of applications would make sense to seriously consider using Node, where it's a good fit. As well as he describes kind of down at the bottom, so the types of server-side applications. He also talks about where he would not recommend using Node. So particularly where we have a relational database or an application where we're doing lots of heavy computation. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all. Node is the right tool for many types of applications. It's the wrong tool for other types. So I'll leave that link. That link is on Blackboard. I would suggest you may want to have a look at it because it's going to give you kind of a pretty informed decision about helping you make a decision if you've got to build an application, whether Node is a good fit for it or not. And so that's that first link right here in lesson 3. Okay, so I want to go back to our calculator. Our calculator's running, but the one thing it doesn't do is there's no formatting here. We've just got plain text on our numbers. Now, JavaScript has no built-in function to format numbers as currency. So what we want to do is we're going to go find a package on the NPM website that we can use that will have a function that already exists for formatting this stuff as currency. So I'll just go, now there's a number of different packages. I'll just go to npm.js and we can maybe do a search. I'll maybe search for currency. See what comes up. Okay, here's one right here. A simple JavaScript utility that allows you to display currency. Sounds like what we want to do. It's called currency-formatter. And here's the command they recommend. I'm going to show you, we're going to actually install this a couple of times. There's a couple ways we can install it. And then it tells us exactly how to use it. We make a link. Obviously, this is a little dated. It uses var not let. So we download and install the package. We reference it in our file. And then we just call currency formatter.format, pass in a value. And then we can specify the currency format with a country code, right? We want US dollars, British pounds, euros, or something else. Or we can specify, rather than the currency format, we can specify a language and culture code, and it will render the proper currency. Now, there's something here we haven't seen. So there's sort of two different save commands. So here's the shortcut, npm I. We don't need to type the word install. We can just use I for install. This version is npm I currency formatter. This one is a little bit older, as npm install instead of I. It also has this at the end, this -- save. So there's two different ways to install. We're going to do the shortcut first, and then we'll look at the -- save version after, and we'll see the differences in installing. Either one will work, but they're going to behave in different ways, and we'll talk about this in a bit. So I'm going to run this install command first. So there's two ways I can do this. my server is still active. Keep in mind, I got nodemon running, so I can't actually run a command right now. So one option is actually stop the server and run my npm install command in this window. The other thing I could do is I could leave this one up. I could then open another command window, go in here and run my install command without having to turn my server off. Either one will work. I'll just stop my server with Control-C. Oh, it also tells me that nodemon, just like WebStorm noticed, nodemon has an upgrade from last week. npm automatically tells me. So we may as well upgrade our nodemon version as well. It's gone from 1.14.11 to 1.14.12. So I'm going to terminate my server, and I'll run that command in blue. We don't have to do this, but generally a good idea to keep things up to date. So I'll run npm I for install -g. What did -g mean? We talked about this last week. Yeah, it's global. So we're not installing nodemon in this folder. We're installing it globally on our system so it can be used from any folder. So this is optional, but I may as well keep things up to date. If there's an update, I'll use it. So I'm just following the command that appears in blue. And it's going to update my nodemon as well as any dependencies that nodemon requires. So it's downloading from the npm site, npm source code registry. It's actually nodemon itself, right? We can see the the version of nodemon I had, and now the version of nodemon I've been upgraded to. Is useful, right? So it tells us it updated. So yes, Rob. So one of the packages, one of the dependencies inside also got updated, because not only did it update nodemon, it updated something else that nodemon depended on. So I've now upgraded from 1.14.11 to 1.14.12. So now I'm going to run this command. So I could copy it and right-click and paste it in, or I can just type the command. We want to install, not globally, just in our week 3 folder, our currency formatter. We don't need it in most of our other projects, so we're not going to install it globally. We'll install currency formatter. It has a few dependencies because overall it says it added 4 packages. Right? So here are the dependencies. So it requires the accounting package, the local currency, and object assign, which is why we installed 1, but it tells us 4 things were installed. So now we should be able to just make a reference to it. And each time we want to display a number, we can package it with this currency formatter. So we'll refer to it. We can call it anything we want. They called the variable currency formatter. That's a little long for me. I'll just maybe call my variable currency. Okay, we start typing, it recognizes. So this is installed in our user roaming profile inside of the global node, in sort of node module. Sorry, it's not global. Notice, once we did that, it creates a node modules subfolder for us. We don't have this in week 2 because the only npm package we installed globally. So it doesn't get installed in here. in week 3, my node modules folder just got built 2 minutes ago. So it includes the currency formatter as well as the 2 dependencies that currency formatter needs. All 4 of them are here. So it actually recognizes, my code editor recognizes everything in node modules in the local project. So now in our output line, we want to wrap each one of these values with we want to use our formatting function. So rather than appearing as numbers, they appear as dollars and cents with the dollar sign. Notice the name of all NPM packages. They don't use camel case. If the package has multiple words, it's all lowercase separated by hyphens or dashes. So you can see here are the dependencies. Notice there's no capital letters. So we've got locale, dash currency, object, dash assign, and all of these other ones. That's the format of the names of NPM packages. So if you're going to make your own package, that's how you have to name it. So now we're going to use this .format function. So let's try it first just around our subtotal. We're going to call format. What's the value we're formatting? We're formatting our subtotal. And we just put in a little JavaScript array with a key and a value. Nope. That has to be inside of curly braces. The first parameter is the numeric value we want to format, then a comma, and then we've got these curly braces with a little JavaScript object with a key and a value. I'm going to save that. Now our server is stopped, right? We stopped the server. It is freezing in here, isn't it? Keep putting on the jackets. We need to start the server again. We had to stop it in order to install the currency package. So our server's offline. So I'll just hit my up arrow until I get back to my nodemon command. We want to run the tax calculator again. So you can either type that command or by hitting the up and down arrows, cycles through our commands. We want to run this one. Nodemon, run the tax calculator file again. So if we hit enter and now we refresh our browser, our subtotal amount only right now should show with the dollar symbol and 2 decimal places. So we'll run it again. And our first amount is now formatted as currency. We also should probably try some other amounts to make sure our logic still works. So this is why we really need the formatting. The numbers came out okay when I put in an even number, but when I put in an amount that doesn't calculate nicely, right, we really want our currency formatting here. The tax and the subtotal really don't look right. Not only are we missing the dollar sign, but they're not, the numbers aren't rounded to 2 decimal places, which they should be. So we want to call the currency.format function again 2 more times, right? We want to wrap both the tax as well as the total inside that same function. We'll format the tax. Might be a little easier if I do it this way. A little easier to read. Spacing doesn't really matter. If I add a little spacing, it's a little easier to read, I think. So that should be all we need to format all those numbers. I could even try if I wanted a different currency. I want this in British pounds, for example, I could use that code. It didn't come out very well. Well, it does show my pounds, but I get this. We'll keep it in dollars and cents. So we're basically using 3 different packages, 2 of which, the HTTP and the URL library, those come with Node. So if we install Node on our machines, we automatically have access to HTTP and the URL library. And then we've installed currency just for this project. If we tried to use the currency in any of our files from last week, we would get errors. A reference error because it doesn't exist in our week 2 folder. It only exists inside of node modules in week 3. So this actually isn't all that different to the way our ASP.NET MVC handled packages. With our ASP.NET MVC sites, we could just pull one up from last semester. So here's our music store. Any references we made went inside of the packages folder. Right here were all the dependencies, all the libraries that our project used. So we could use any of the functions, methods, properties in these libraries. If we installed another reference, it got added to the packages folder. So in a Node application, it's basically similar, except instead of that folder being called packages, it's called Node modules. And just like with our ASP.NET MVC site, we included, we had a git ignore file, and the git ignore, we wanted to include the packages. So if we upload to Git, we didn't want all these libraries uploaded to GitHub and waste the bandwidth and the storage space on GitHub. It will be the same thing when we put this on GitHub. We want to, in the git ignore, we want to include the node modules folder. All of the supporting packages we don't want to include on GitHub. And in fact, you'll notice, if I'll just go to GitHub for a second, I gave you, for ASP.NET, I gave you a git ignore file for Visual Studio, and it automatically included that packages folder in the git ignore. If you actually make a repository on GitHub, we actually have this option. They don't have it for Visual Studio. They actually have a node option here. So if I pick this when making a new repository, it will generate the git ignore automatically. That will exclude all the stuff we don't want to be uploading to GitHub. Why they don't have one here for Visual Studio, I haven't quite figured out. They really should. Oh, they do. That's why I haven't figured it out, because I've just missed it. Any questions about using our NPM package?
For different currency, we need different, like for Canadian and for BCAD?
Well, it would be the same, because the format, there is no Canadian currency format. It's the same as the US currency format. So we can try, for example, if I wanted into like euros, I think that's the code. Doesn't quite come out right. I think it's because my format is HTML. I think if I change my format of the response to plain text, it would come out properly. But yeah, the documentation says here, code, British pounds, Great Britain pounds, euros, and it shows you what it would look like. So there's more description. The documentation's on the NPM site. And usually they also show you the source code. So if the documentation isn't on NPM, all of the NPM packages are the source code's public. So usually they have the link to their GitHub repository where you can see the source code. And often they either repeat the documentation on GitHub or it's either in one or the other. The documentation is sometimes on NPM, sometimes on GitHub, sometimes they repeat it on both. And you can download it from here as well. So we've used this version with I, but then we also have this version of install that says -- save. We're going to reinstall the package. This time we're going to use the -- save option, as I want to show you what it does. So I'm going to stop my server for a minute. So it's no problem to just install the package over top. We don't have to uninstall it to reinstall it again. If there's an update, it just does an in-place install or upgrade. So this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to type npm I currency-formatter -- save. So I'm just following what's in gray here, except I'm doing a shortcut for I instead of install. So I'm following this command here. If you type the full command with install, no problem. And I'll hit enter. Okay. Now, let's go back here. Now you'll notice there's something new here. It installed it again. It says it updated that package. We have a file in here we didn't create. What file's here? Yeah, this package lock.json. I'm just going to open this up. So it generated this JSON file, and it displays all of the dependencies in our project, right? So it shows currency formatter. It gives us the download link to the source code from the NPM registry. It shows us the current version, and it shows us any dependencies of each package we installed. So this was generated automatically. Now, typically, Raj?
If we use local currency, and it will show automatically the local currency that user is operating the website.
It would be the currency of the server.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So the server setting. What set is this? The regional settings on the server.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So I know there's a few of you who have on your laptops, you don't have English as your language. You work in your own native language. Well, if you put that in as local, it would be it would be based on that setting on the server. So this is sort of a useful file. This shows us the dependencies. Most of our Node applications, we're going to have a similar file to this, but instead of package lock.json, it's going to be called package.json. And it's kind of like our web.config file in our ASP.NET. Not only does it list the dependencies, it will list any other kind of settings for the application. Now we can build this. I think I have a sample somewhere here of what this looks like. Maybe it's not this one. Yeah, not yet. We actually want to build one of these. So normally we just installed an NPM package. Typically, before we install an NPM package, we want to initialize NPM in our project. And that's going to automatically build a JSON configuration file for us. So there's a simple command we can run to do this, and then we're going to install our currency formatter one more time, and you'll see what happens. So let's run this command. Let's run the command npm init. We're just like git init, we're initializing npm in our project. So run npm init, and we'll see what this does. It tells us this is going to walk us through creating a package.json file. So this utility, rather than us creating this file, it's going to do it for us. We simply have to answer the questions. So the first thing is, what's the name of this application? And it shows us in brackets, it's going to default to the name of the folder, which is week 3. So we can either give it a different name, or if we want to accept that as our choice, we can just hit enter. I'll just hit enter. And it says, okay, what version is the application? It starts at 1.0.0. So we can either put in a different version number, or we can accept that. Again, just hit enter. Description. If you want the description to be blank, hit enter. Otherwise, we can put in a description, intro to NPM. I'll put in as my description. Hit enter. Entry point. So this means, what's the startup file? So if we specify that, we can now run our application with just Node or NodeMon, and we don't have to specify a particular file. Whatever we say is the startup file, it will run. So we'll put it in as we'll maybe make our tax calculator the startup file. I don't think you actually need the extension. I think it'll work without it. Testing, we'll come back to unit testing later, so I'll ignore that. Just hit enter. We can even tie right here to a Git repository if we want. So I'll just hit enter. I won't worry about that for now. Any keywords. So this means if we publish this on NPM, if users search, then our repository will be tagged with these keywords. I'll just hit enter to ignore that. Author, you put your name in if you want. License, I'll just hit enter. And then it gives us a preview. It says, hey, we're going to build package.json, and it's going to look like this. Are you okay with this? If you hit enter, it now generates a package.json file, and it'll appear in our code editor. So here's our application configuration. It sets out some basic information about the application. And the most important part is it includes a list of any dependencies or packages. What this little symbol means is version 1.3.2, that's the current one, or higher. So we can upgrade this version, but doesn't work with a lower version.
Do we have to, if we add any more, do we have to manually, or do we have to, or not?
No, let's install another dependency. We won't use it, but that's the difference between this and this. So we'll find another dependency, some other package we're just going to install. We don't need it. I'll just find, maybe I'll just find something for, say, I don't know, let's find a LinkedIn package. Not really going to use LinkedIn, but we'll pretend we were. So we could install it, but we want to install it with the -- save option. So I'm going to run npm I linked in dash node -- save. So when I run this command with -- save, downloads the package, and notice it automatically adds that dependency to my package.json with the version. If I go and look in node modules, here it is. So it's downloaded the package, the source code. So we can install packages. We don't need the -- save, but if we don't include it, the dependency, it still downloads and we can still use it, but it doesn't get added to our package.json. You would have to add it manually if you want to track it. So usually when we install a package into a folder, we usually want the save option because then npm automatically tracks it in package.json. So this is useful for us so that we can see what dependencies are in the project and what versions are here. So most of the time when we install packages, we're going to want the -- save option because we want those tracked in package.json. So our application still works without the -- save, but our code is going to be more organized and more clear if we do choose that option when adding a package. So typically, I kind of did this in the reverse order. We actually installed the currency formatting first before we had a package.json file. Usually, the first thing we'll do is run that npm init to initialize npm and get a package.json set up. Then we install all our packages with the -- save option so that they get tracked here. And we can we can change anything in this file if we want. This is just a starting point. So I think now, because we've set our main file as tax calculator, I think I can actually run this now without specifying which file to load. It should load my tax calculator automatically, I think. We'll try it. So I'm going to run this with nodemon. Yeah, and it says it's starting the tax calculator file. So I should be able to go back now and refresh. Excuse me. So my file's still running, even though my euros formatting isn't coming out right. So we won't normally need to specify when we start our server. We don't normally need to run the command nodemon and then put in the name of a file. We're going to use package.json to specify, in effect, the homepage or the startup file. And usually, once we build this out with Express, that file will have one or two names. Right? It's either going to be called app.js or server.js, like we built last week. That'll be the startup file. And that'll get listed right here in package.json. So to start our application, we can just run either nodemon or we could run a different npm command to run it. Okay. So this file's done. So what we're going to do, I think we'll take a break here. We come back, we'll do one more sample. We're going to install another npm package here. And instead of we're going to start our server up a different way. Instead of using the HTTP library, we're going to use a different connect module to run our HTTP server. Because what this really only allows us to load a JavaScript file. We actually want to be able to write different URLs and have our server load different things in the browser based on the URL, which this HTTP library doesn't really let us do. So we'll use another package for that, and we'll make a few kind of virtual URLs and send different responses based on the URL request that comes in. So we'll install that, we'll have a look at that package, we'll install it, and we'll use it after the break. Okay, so we'll take a break here.